April's virtual thesis defense. And so we're actually going to go ahead and record this because she may need to share it with some other people later on. So I'll begin with a brief reminder of the structure of the defense. April is going to present her work for about 30 minutes. And then we'll have time for questions from everyone who is not on the thesis committee. And so we ask that if you have questions, could you please hold them until after the presentation is finished? And then at that point, you can ask them verbally or type them into the chat. After a period of questions from the audience, then we'll ask you all to log off, and the thesis committee will remain and ask their questions and conduct their business. So a little bit about April. April is a second-year graduate student who, like many others in our program, had her thesis project impacted by the pandemic. And way back in 2020, shortly after she was accepted into the graduate program, she contacted me in June to start talking about potential research projects. And that's a little bit unusual. Many of our students wait until they arrive in the fall to start talking about their thesis, but not April. She wanted to get everything set up as soon as possible. And she even wanted to talk about additional research that she could do beyond her thesis. And so we had several conversations throughout the summer because there was so much uncertainty at that time about what we were going to be able to do or not do in the labs. And we weren't really even sure if we were going to be able to collect data in the field. And so for someone trying to plan out the next couple of years and make them as productive as possible, you can imagine how frustrating that might have been for her. And so she had several ideas about what she wanted to do for a thesis topic, but most of them were just not going to be feasible given the constraints on data collection. And so fortunately, we had this study on graphene in the works, and it was something that she was interested in. And we were able to get approval for her to collect her data. And after all that, I'm very happy to tell you that she was able to collect data for 48 subjects, which I think is pretty phenomenal given the challenges over the last 2 years. And I'm also happy to say that she's been accepted into a funded graduate position at Griffith University in Australia, where she will be studying sprint paddling mechanics in female surfers, which is a topic that she's always had an interest in. And so April's had a few challenges over the last 2 years, but she's worked really hard and she's pulled through. And I'm excited for her to share her project with you today. So April, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, for that very nice introduction. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, assuming everyone can see this. So hi, everyone. I'm April, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to be going over my research project titled The Effect of Interior Wetsuit Material on Thermoregulation. And this study was done under the guidance of my committee with Jeff Nessler as the chair, Dr. Sean Newcomer, Dr. Wallace J. Nichols, and Bruce Moore on the committee. I first just wanted to thank my committee for their support and guidance these last 2 years. As Jeff mentioned, was a roller coaster of 2 years for everyone, and I really appreciate your support. I also want to thank Raina Matsuno for her statistics expertise, and Matt Schubert and Matt Becker for their help and support along the way as well. Also wanted to give a shout out to Tyler Wiles for his help. He's a previous graduate student, giving me support coming into the program and then also helping me with the project along the way. My kinesiology professors and cohort of students, and then lastly, my family and friends for their constant support. So thank you, everyone. The contents that I'll be discussing today include the introduction, purpose and hypothesis of the study, materials and methods, results, discussion, and then finally the conclusion. So I'll start with the introduction. So thermoregulation poses an important issue on surfer safety and performance in the water. Cold water surfers are subject to a decrease in body temperature, which can affect extremity function, balance, vigilance and concentration, changes in mood and personality, physiological impacts such as strain on the heart and respiratory system, and this can also lead to pain, numbness, and even hypothermia. Along with a safety risk, cold waters impose an impact on performance. Specifically, rate properties of muscle, such as power, can decrease in the cold, and this can lead to a reduction in muscular endurance during dynamic contractions, as well as diminished manual dexterity. According to the Canadian Red Cross Society, cold water swimmers only have about 10% of their swimming capacity when compared to warm water. In addition, wetsuits are worn to provide a barrier to physical injury, add to buoyancy in the water, and potentially enhance paddle technique. So wetsuits work by reducing heat loss through through insulation. And this first layer of insulation is the neoprene rubber itself due to its high insulating properties. Next, as you see in this larger image here, when we are in cold environments, body heat from the skin is released into the cold environment. And when we add a layer of a wetsuit here, this creates an insulating effect by trapping water in between the skin and the wetsuit. And heat is instead transferred into this trapped material, and it warms up this water, trapped water, and it warms up this area, creating an insulating effect. Traditional wetsuits are based on a 3-layer strategy, with the interior or first layer being a wicking material, and this reduces conductive heat loss to the environment. The second layer or the middle layer is an insulating material, and the third is a barrier to convective heat loss. So it is important that the interior layer of a wetsuit be both a wicking material and have low conductivity to be able to prevent heat loss to the environment. This image shows a close-up of closed cell structure neoprene. And you can see here these little cells actually trap air inside them, and this increases insulation and thermal resistance. So high thermal resistance is equal to low thermal conductivity, and these factors are influenced by the thickness and density of neoprene. And it is well understood that the thicker the neoprene, the more insulation the surfer gets and the warmer they'll be. But this increase in thickness also decreases flexibility and potentially will reduce movement and paddle performance. So it is really important that wetsuit companies look into alternative materials that will increase insulation without this mechanical disadvantage caused by this increased thickness. So wetsuits are commonly made using a traditional polyester fleeced interior due to its high insulating properties. Polyester has low moisture uptake and absorbs only 0.4% of water. Fleece also has high wicking properties, which is very important in the interior material. When a material gets wet, water molecules replace air, and since convective heat loss is 3 to 5 times greater in water than in air, this increases thermal conductivity and decreases the thermal resistance of the material, which is why it's so important for fleece to have, for the interior material to have high wicking properties. And even though this works, wetsuit companies are constantly searching for new methods in order to increase thermoregulation in surfers. So this leads us to graphene, which has recently been used in the interior of a wetsuit with claims of superior warmth. A study was done using UV light placed on graphene in traditional linings, and this UV light was used to mimic body heat. And as you can see in this graph here, the graphene material got warmer faster, was warmer overall, and stayed warmer longer, even when the heat was turned off. And however, there's no current research done in how graphene will perform in the water. So graphene is known to be kind of a superpower material. It has high mechanical strength, with a single layer being about 200 times more resilient than steel. Its thickness and strength have an inverse relationship. It is lightweight and flexible, and this leads to its potential to increase flexibility and durability in the water without increasing thickness. It has large surface area and high electrical and thermal conductivity due to the strong covalent bonds between carbon atoms. Specifically, graphene's conductivity is 10,000 times greater than other textiles and 10 times greater than copper in dry environments. However, as I said previously, there has been no current data on how graphene will act in the water or when applied to wetsuits. This leads us to the purpose of the study, which was to determine if there are differences in skin temperature under graphene synthetic fleece versus traditional polyester fleece materials in the interior layer of a wetsuit. We hypothesize that there will be no differences in skin temperature under graphene synthetic fleece versus traditional polyester fleece materials due to graphene's high thermal conductive properties. To materials and methods. So 48 male recreational surfers were recruited by word of mouth for this study. They had at least 1 year of prior surfing experience, or between the ages of 18 and 50, were able to fit into a small, medium, or large wetsuit and reported no known injuries at the time of data collection. All participants were informed of procedures, completed a questionnaire on surfing experience and physical activity levels, and provided written consent before participation. And this is an image of me instrumenting one of the students with the skin temperature thermistors. We took data at multiple locations up and down the California coast, including Marin County, San Francisco County, Santa Cruz County, San Luis Obispo County, and North County, San Diego. We chose multiple locations because we wanted to be able to collect data year round, and San Diego's water is really warm in the summer and too warm for wetsuit data. Experimental protocol was based off of study in 2020 by Smith et al. And here is an image of the wetsuit that was used, which is a 2mm Hurley full suit back zip wetsuit. And it is turned inside out to showcase the interior materials. There were 6 custom wetsuits made, 2 wetsuits per size. And here on the red side is the graphene synthetic fleece on the interior. And this was made by infusing graphene material into synthetic yarns. This was knitted into the fleece jersey. It has polychloroprene, closed cell foam neoprene in the middle, and nylon on the exterior. And then the other side, the gray side, has traditional polyester fleece on the interior, polychloroprene, closed cell foam neoprene in the middle, and nylon on the exterior. There were no differences in arm and leg materials, and this was a double-blind study, and the graphene side of the wetsuit was randomized between participants. 8 eye-button skin temperature thermistors with an accuracy of plus or minus 0.5 degrees Celsius were instrumented in 8 locations on the participants. As you can see here on the upper photo, it's a picture of the eye-button thermistors. And they were placed on the left and right upper back, the left and right chest, the left and right abdomen, and the left and right lower back, as shown here. They were attached with 3M Tegaderm film, and skin temperature data was recorded once every minute throughout the surf session. We did not take heart rate monitor during this study. All right, meteorological data. So the surf session duration was a minimum of 40 minutes. Surfers were able to surf longer, but they had to adhere to at least 40 minutes. We started the session when the participants entered the water and ended it when they exited the water. And this enter-exit point was defined as at ankle height based on a study done by Kellogg et al. In 2020. We recorded meteorological data at each surf session, including water temperature, ambient air temperature, wind strength and direction, and predominant wave height, period, and direction. This was recorded from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's buoys, or NOAA. And we also used NOAA's historical data when we were at an out of service location during a surf session, as well as Wonderground personal weather stations for wind and air temperature when needed. Perceptual data was recorded and asked upon exiting the water for all participants after the surf session to reduce bias. All 48 participants were asked which side felt warmer, and a subset of participants were asked which side kept them drier, which side felt more comfortable, had they heard of graphene, where had they heard of graphene, did they think that graphene would be warmer than normal fleece. Additionally, a set of questions were asked after participants had been handed a dry wetsuit to evaluate, and these included which side looks warmer, which side feels warmer to the touch, which side looks more comfortable, and which side feels more comfortable. Data was uploaded onto a one-wire viewer and transferred to Microsoft Excel for statistical analysis. We used R Studio for statistical analysis and began by averaging temperature across 5-minute increments from minute 1 to 40 minutes, which created 8 time intervals or epochs. 40 minutes was chosen to accommodate as many surfers as possible based on the minimum surf duration criteria. And surfers that went longer than 40 minutes, we just took their first 40 minutes to analyze. A two-way repeated measures ANOVA was used to compare wetsuit materials across time at each thermistor location. And post-hoc analysis, we used a t-test to compare skin temperatures between materials at each of the epochs for significant thermistor locations, and used a Benjamin-Hochberg analysis to control for false discovery rate. Statistical significance was set at a p-value of less than 0.05, and values were reported as means plus or minus standard error. Moving on to results. So this is a table shows the summary of subject characteristics. We had an average height of an average age of about 25 years old, an average height of 181.5 centimeters, an average mass of about 77 kilograms. Participants had an average of about 11 years of surfing experience, and self-reported competency was 6.45 on a 1 to 10 scale. For surf session characteristics, our water temperature average was 15.8 degrees Celsius. Air temperature was 14.6 degrees Celsius. Wind speed was about 8.3 knots. Wind direction, 234.8 degrees. Predominant wave height was around 3.5 feet. Predominant wave interval was around 13 seconds, and predominant wave direction was around 251 degrees. This table shows a breakdown of meteorological data by location. Since the most important characteristic for this study was water temperature, especially due to its high conductivity, we noted that temperatures across all locations were relatively similar. Moving on to thermoregulatory characteristics. So this figure shows skin temperature over time at the upper back. between the traditional polyester fleece material and the graphene synthetic fleece material. And you can see here that there are no significant differences in skin temperature measures under materials at the upper back. Also at the chest, we saw no significant differences between materials for skin temperature measures at the chest. And at the abdomen, there were no significant differences in skin temperature measures between materials at the abdomen. We did, however, see skin temperature differences under materials at the lower back, with the traditional polyester fleece material showing greater skin temperatures than the graphene synthetic fleece. And we saw differences in minute 1 through 40, and this is shown with asterisks above standard error bars. So this is a table on the summary of perceptual data referring to how participants felt about the wetsuits in the water. The majority of participants felt that there was no difference in which side felt warmer and which side felt drier. And about 42% of participants felt that there was no difference in which side was more comfortable. Additional perceptual data refers to how participants felt about the wetsuits outside of the water. And here the majority of participants felt that fleece looked and felt like it would be warmer and more comfortable than graphene. Additionally, the majority of participants said they had heard of graphene, and when asked where they had heard of graphene, the most common response was Billabong. Even though participants had heard of the material graphene, the majority of them did not know if it would be warmer than normal fleece. And on to the discussion. In this study, we assessed the skin temperature differences under graphene synthetic fleece and traditional polyester fleece neoprene. And results revealed skin temperature was not significantly different under the two materials at the upper back, chest, and abdomen locations. And this is consistent with our hypothesis that graphene would not add to the thermoregulatory benefits of fleece. Interestingly, we did see a difference in skin temperature in the lower back, and these skin temperatures were warmer under the traditional fleece compared to the graphene. And lastly, perceptual responses were consistent with skin temperature measures. So despite claims of graphene superior warmth, we saw no differences in skin temperature under materials at the upper back, abdomen, and chest locations. And we attribute this to graphene's high conductive properties. Again, as a body warms, heat is transferred to the gap of water between the skin and the neoprene, and a material with low conductivity prevents this heat transfer further into the environment, whereas a material with high conductivity will facilitate this heat transport. Therefore, it is important that an interior material of a wetsuit be both a wicking material and have low thermal conductivity. Interestingly, we did see a difference in skin temperature under materials at the lower back, with traditional fleece being warmer than graphene. This further shows that graphene did not increase skin temperature measures and may have even had a counteracting effect. We attribute this first to, again, graphene's high conductivity. And another potential reason or speculation, though we did not study this, was that the lower back is most subject to variability in water exposure due to its constant movement between activities. So surfers spend about half to more than half the time paddling, 28 to 42% of their sessions stationary, only about 4 to 8% of the time wave riding, and 2 to 16% on miscellaneous activities such as swimming or wading. And when paddling, participants or surfers are on their stomach in a prone position with the ventral aspect of their torso exposed to the water. Depending on their board size, their board sits at an upward angle, exposing the lower torso and lower extremities to the water. And this can increase convective heat loss in the areas exposed to the water. So this is just another potential reason due to the intermittent nature of the lower back's exposure to the water compared to the other anatomical locations studied. But this was not measured, and further research should look into this as a potential reason. Perceptual data confirmed skin temperature measures, with the majority of participants reporting that the two sides felt equal in temperature. Thermal sensations are felt with skin temperature changes as small as 0.003 degrees Celsius. So theoretically, surfers should be able to feel a very small difference between in skin temperature. However, they felt no difference, and this further confirms that there was no difference in materials. When referring to a dry version of the wetsuit, the majority of participants responded that the fleece half looked and felt warmer and more comfortable than the graphene half. And we have seen that studies show brand claims can trigger a placebo effect, which might contribute to the consumers believing graphene is warmer than traditional fleece. For example, while collecting data on these questions, I had participants state that the color red reminded them of warmth, or that the color gray reminded them of winter, or what they'd expect graphene to look like. So regardless of these preconceived ideas, participants still chose fleece as being looking and feeling like it would be more warm as compared to graphene. And this just provides some insight on whether participants are biased to the graphene material and how consumers might choose a wetsuit in the store based on look and feel of a material. For the limitations of our study, first, the graphene and fleece interior wetsuit materials were tested in a narrow range of water temperatures. These temperatures are very common for at least Southern California surfers, but for future studies could look at a wider range of water temperatures and environmental conditions. Second, graphene and fleece materials were limited to the torso and were closely situated, which could have created an interaction effect in water between materials. However, this study design has been used in previous studies, and we have seen a difference in skin temperature at the torso with the study design. So we know it works, but future research should look at extending material to the extremities, because we believe this could result in a more homogeneous distribution of skin temperature across the body, because excess warmth from the upper body could conduct to the lower body. And lastly, the largest limitation of our study we believe to be is the pattern of the two materials is different. And wetsuit companies claim that this pattern has a lot to do with insulation. So therefore we would need to have both materials be the same pattern to really get to understand this. Future research should look at if pattern itself has an influence on thermoregulation. Additionally, research should determine if adding graphene in a wetsuit design would improve range of motion and wetsuit durability for the surfer. And lastly, further investigate if adding graphene in wetsuit design would improve sustainability of the wetsuit. And for the conclusion, the wetsuit industry is growing to meet market demands. And along with these market demands, there is a focus on improving sustainability, durability, flexibility, and warmth. In this study, we assessed the thermoregulatory benefits of this graphene material, and based on current findings, it does not seem that there is evidence to support the claims of graphene's superior warmth. Therefore, future research is needed to determine if graphene is a suitable material for use in wetsuits. Thank you.
All right, thank you, April. Very, very well done. Are there any questions from the audience? So you can either ask them verbally or type them into the chat. Oh, so we have Dr. Dominguez raised his hand. You have a question?
Yes, first of all, really nice presentation. Congratulations on compiling all of this research and presenting it really clearly. I did have a question about, or I was curious about whether you see a difference in the absolute temperature between the, say, upper torso areas and the lower abdomen in the studies. And that was something that I was curious about because it would suggest a thermal gradient and would perhaps signal, I think, some heat transport from the upper body down to the lower body. Perhaps, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think about that.
No, that's a great question. And I think that that's something I'm trying to go back slides, sorry, to think about for future studies. Because we kind of see from this that the upper back and the chest area have a little bit of higher temperatures compared to the abdomen and the lower back. And I also think that due to graphene's high conductivity, if the material is spread to the extremities, it could potentially help with that heat distribution. But we didn't, look at this specifically in our research, but we did see that in the graph. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then we will proceed on to the next phase, which is just with the thesis committee. And so we'll thank you all for joining us and ask everyone who's not on the thesis committee to please log off and enjoy your weekend.